Together to welcome our speakers for the economic agenda, we are pleased to introduce Mr. Farhan Ahmad, Chief Executive Officer of Payments Network Malaysia.
Mr. Yasuhiko Matsuda, Country Manager for Malaysia, the World Bank.
Datuk Ami Moris, Chair of 30% Club Malaysia.
Dr. Ong Kian Ming, Director of the Philosophy, Politics and Economics Program at Taylor's University.
As well as the moderator of the session, Mr. Bernard Yap, Partner and Private Tax Leader at Ernst & Young Malaysia, EY.
Over to you, Mr. Bernard.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Firstly, thank you to the organizers and also the Alumni Foundation for having all of us here. Very happy to see a lot of young, enthusiastic faces. And I'm going to be very open and honest. We were supposed to do a 15 minutes catch-up just to plan for this event, but we didn't have the chance. So I've got a fantastic 4 pieces of CVs in front of me here, but I'm not going to go through it. I'm just going to do a very brief introduction of my panel members, and I'm going to see fit as what it is, all right? I'm going to start with Dr. Yasuhiko. Extensive experience globally. He's today our country manager for the World Bank. Because of what I see here in front of me today, with his global experience and everything, you can see that he's today localized, wearing a formal batik, but with an international team on it. So that's how I'm going to introduce him. International, global team person. Second, I have Datuk Ami. Currently the CEO of Maybank Kim Eng, professional executive banker, and also a very passionate driven for D&I. And you can see her today as a professional banker, professionally dressed, but with a little bit more of diversity in her OC shoes. And I guess she's going to be a fit runner there. Third, I've got Professor Dr. Ong. Again, a gentleman with started his career from a banking perspective and then consulting. All right, because that consulting is my part, so he's already going to share with me on that one. Entrepreneur, Deputy Minister of BT. Today is now an academician. We were told to come in formal. Today I envy him because I wish I could go back to the uni days and dress like him as it is. So another
run
runner
10K
as well.
first. You have to run 10K before you can wear this.
So he's also another runner. He's wearing actually a Stand Chart Marathon t-shirt there. All right. I can only do 5K every day in the morning. That's it. I can't keep up with you. And I know you're a very fast runner. And then the last one is Farhan. Farhan's the CEO, Group CEO of PayNet. Also a business entrepreneur, global experience. And you can see from the technology industry, right? He's dressed semi-formal with a fantastic t-shirt there. And I guess I want to ask him to show us what's the motto there on the t-shirt. Don't use cash lah. Okay. So, very quick introduction already. I think the objective of today's session is more from a business impact perspective to Malaysian Madani. And very happy today, you can see the diverse experience, and hopefully we're going to have a lot of an exciting discussion. We've got from a global digital, global World Bank, today our financial banking specialist, and then from the academician. So without further ado, if I can, I'm just going to get the respective individual members here. Maybe start with Dr. Yasu, just to share your thoughts from a global perspective in terms of where Malaysia Madani is and where our country is heading towards, and how you see it because of your role from the World Bank.
Okay, well, Bernard, thank you very much. And first of all, thank you very much to the Pradana Fellows Alumni Association for inviting me back again. I was in this forum last year, and it's really nice to be invited back, so that, because if I wasn't, I would have been a little bit disappointed. So thank you very much. And I just want to make one point before I go into this global perspective thing. This batik is not just local; it's from Kelantan. You know, and as I, and my wife and I looked around for batik shirts, you know, and then my wife always asks us, "Where is this made?" And many of them are from Indonesia, you know. And but this one, you know, we went to Kelantan and bought it, so it was a really very nice experience. So about this Madani economy framework, it's something that we from, you know, the World Bank, of course, but also other diplomatic, you know, communities and so on, waited for some time. And, you know, it was highly anticipated. And part of that, frankly, was because there was this sense of, you know, a little bit of lack of clarity of exactly where this administration was going with the economic policy. And, you know, it finally came out. To be honest, it took a little bit for us to digest it, you know, but as time passed and as we talked about it among, you know, colleagues and others, it began to sink in, you know, and it's very clear that, and somewhat unusual based on my experience anyway, that it's a value-based approach to economic governance. Right? And, you know, when we first heard it, you know, I wasn't sure exactly what that was, but as I hear the Prime Minister and other government officials in the release just now, you know, it's quite consistent, you know, emphasis on the value, social justice, and really people-centered thinking behind the way they're looking at the economy and other public policy issues. So, you know, I think that's an interesting feature of it. Another interesting feature that I think makes it strong is that it anchors other plans that have since been announced. Frankly, I think you have probably too many plans, you know, in this country, but you have them, right? And then some of them matter. Many of them are just documents, to be very honest. So anchoring those plans to the core belief and the principle of the government is a good way to make the plans more meaningful than otherwise. So I think serving as the anchor of these plans is an important function of Madani. So let me stop there. You know, those are our sort of initial impressions of what this thing is. We're still trying to understand, you know, exactly how this is going to be translated into government actions. And, you know, one of the key instruments is the budget we're going to touch on, so I'm not going to go into it now, as well as how these other, you know, associated plans like NIMP are going to be implemented. You know, as a framework, as a guiding post and anchor, you know, I think it's a good start.
Okay, so we hear it from a global perspective. Dr. Yasu appreciates it. And there's a lot of papers and a lot of concepts there. Maybe it's about prioritizing which is the way to move forward in order for the government and for the rakyat and also for the business environment to be able to pursue our dreams there. Dr. Ami, if I may, if you could share with us from your perspective as how inclusivity can bring into this whole concept and also be an enabler and catalyst for it.
Okay, I actually have some slides. But before, if I could have the slides while we wait for my slides, I just want to say a huge thank you to PayNet. So awesome. Thank you, Farhan. Thank you, June, because without PayNet, you know, that leafy logo there, that 30% club logo wouldn't be there. So thank you, thank you. And, you know, 30% Club is a pure voluntary advocacy platform, right, to champion diversity, equity, and inclusion. Secondly, I would like to ask a big thank you from all the gentlemen on the stage, because without me being on the diversity ticket, this panel would not be allowed. It would be called a manel. And I'm so sorry, right, in this day and age, that is really no longer permissible. So if I could have my slides, that would be really great. Okay, cool. I'll have to look this way. Before I actually, where do I point? Okay, next. Maybe I'll just say next, right? Okay, I don't want to be pedantic, but I see a room full of fantastic intellectual talent. So what I wanted to do really is that to bring home, right, the conversation. There'll be a lot of macro stuff, and, you know, Nurul Izzah gave such a fantastic speech about how to anchor values. And what I want to bring to people today is to start off with purpose, because purpose is so key. And, you know, there's so many definitions, but what I really wanted and I liked was the Harvard Business Review, right? Because it captures the word aspirational, right? It captures the word inspires. Very importantly, it captures the word call to action, right? For all stakeholders, and the goal being to provide benefit, right, to society. So that is something that, you know, drives all of us, because Madani values is really that common purpose. Could I have the next slide, please? So actually, I want to correct Bernard. I'm actually retired. I actually just retired last year from my role as the CEO of Maybank Investment Banking Group. And in my portfolio, I didn't just cover Malaysia, I covered 9 other markets. So in my spare time these days, which is not a lot, I really gave it a lot of thought, you know, of my 3 decades of experience in the capital market, right? In the world of equity market and in the world of investment banking. And I thought, yeah, sure, given, right? It's money and financial capital that really moves the world and motivates individuals. But in my 3 decades, what I really, really want to share on this Saturday morning is that what really matters, you know, to make that difference, to really bring about that X factor, is really people. Ordinary people, people like you and me, being purpose-led, making sure that there is the common purpose, and common purpose includes having integrity, right? Being emotive and inspiring others, because what you will get then is perhaps what sometimes I feel is lacking in Malaysians, right, including myself, is the pride of purpose. So that brings me to the next slide, okay, which is really a big question that I try to ask myself daily. Typically, it is about myself, in relation to myself, and in relation to organizations. But today, because we are here, right, I wanted to ask it in relation to us as one nation. And really is that, why do we as Malaysians wake up every morning and do what we do? I mean, you know, I do try to do that every day to make sure that there's a reason for what you do. Because why it matters is that if all of us, right, we already give 100%, if each of us could give an extra 5%, that is really where we are going to be distinguished. That is really where we are going to have that differentiation. And just like my fellow panel members, spending the time today, the 2 hours, is equivalent to the 5% extra, right? Because in 8-hour day, 40-hour week, that this 2 hours is our extra 5%. So next, the next slide. Ooh. Okay, why should what Malaysia does matter to the world, right? And perhaps this is something that I want to be a bit more specific about, which means that I need to look at my notes, right? Is really that I think Nurul Iza also mentioned that Malaysia is entering what we call a high stress cycle. High debt, ringgit weakness, and increasing regional competition. Our major exports, oil and gas, palm oil, semiconductor manufacturing, they all face productivity and growth issues. So our solution needs to be an increase in our human capabilities, human capital capabilities and competencies, where before we have relied on the business model of low wage growth, right? That has gone on too long and is really killing our wage growth and workforce value agenda. Because we are in this high stress cycle, the solutions to me, and I have been in so many forums for the last 2 months, so many panels, so many sessions. I've heard, even Nur Hisham is in the room, you know, I heard him at the University of Malaya Symposium. The missing things that perhaps we need to connect is that the solution needs to be long-term. There is no overnight solution to the kind of structural, complex issues and challenges that we as a nation face today. Not possible. So the term for me is that the solution needs to be a long-term solution with interval milestones that are clearly articulated and shared transparently in terms of execution achievement. And the Madani goals, there are 7 of them. So those are already the KPIs that we all need to wake up as Malaysians to try and achieve. And that's why it does matter what Malaysia does, for the world, which brings me to the last question that I have this morning, which is, can I have the next slide? Which is this question. What will the world miss if Malaysia didn't exist? I mean, seriously, I think that we have to spend a lot of time really digesting, dissecting, investing in this question, because if we can't answer that, right, then we won't know where we are headed. So to me, these are my thoughts, right? Malaysia has both the old technology, the oil and gas expertise, we have the solar manufacturing solutions, and we also have, guess what? The new transition assets. We are over 50% forested. We have an abundance of hydro, and we have relatively high irradiance, which provides for solar solutions. And of course, the beauty of the most important thing is that we have the biodiversity of mangroves and seagrass. I'm not sure how many people actually have been acquainted to seagrass habitat and environments, right? Phenomenal. Their capacity to sequester carbon is 15 to 25 times more than terrestrial forests. So figure that out, right? So to me, we have all the necessary assets to lead the world in the energy transition. And we have the ability to lead this transition with our deep expertise in Islamic finance to enable a just transition. So that would be what I would say that the world would miss if Malaysia didn't exist. So the world could, and I say this as a challenge to every one of you here, the world could miss a leader that is firstly, net zero oil producing nation. Secondly, the leader at sequestering carbon by managing and monetizing our abundant rainforest. And thirdly, a leader that is innovating carbon capture from the sea surrounding us. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me sing let those three questions sing, and I look forward to all your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Datuk Ami. Very inspirational, and I like the fact that she's illustrated it a lot of positive for us. You can always take it, the glass is half empty or half full. I'm very happy to hear this because you always look at the positive side. And if all of us can do, as what she said, the next 5-10%, that will be the big difference in where we are going to be in the future. Dr. Ong, if I may ask you to share your views from a macro perspective in relation to the Malaysian Madani.
Testing. Okay, yeah, fine. Yeah, thanks, Bernard. Thanks to all the sponsors for today's event. For those of you who may not know, if not for PayNet, we wouldn't have Do It Now, and we wouldn't have the unified QR code. So, thank you. Although a little bit of a blowback recently because of some charges issues, but I think it's an ongoing conversation. Yeah. Thank you very much for Perdana Fellows as well for inviting me. I think it's good to be here in the morning. Give me an excuse to go out and run 10K before I came. Not in these shoes. These shoes are special Milo-colored shoes from Essex. They were passed on to me, and this is the first time I'm wearing it. So it's a combination of international as well as local, and I'll talk a bit about that in my intervention as well. So 3 responses, and I think the way I want to talk about the responses to Economy Madani is ways that would be able to be relevant to you guys as people who are studying and young graduates. How will Madani impact the kind of jobs that you will have or the kind of jobs that you will apply for? and the kind of jobs that you are working as now. Three ways. Firstly, I think with the increase in foreign direct investment, as well as the integration with domestic direct investment, the kind of jobs that we will be able to create in Malaysia would be increasingly one that is higher quality, higher pay, with a lot of new skills that would be required. So whether it's working for a large local corporate like Petronas, that is integrated to the global economy from an oil and gas perspective and now increasingly into renewable, or to working for one of the many shared services companies that makes Malaysia a top 5 shared service destination or global business center destination, or some of the new manufacturing concerns that have set up shop in places like Penang, Selangor, and Johor in the E&E sector, not just in manufacturing, but also in manufacturing services. This is the kind of landscape that we are facing, and many challenges and also many opportunities. So that's one, FDI as well as DDI. The second area that I'm pretty excited about from an economy Madani perspective is in the area of digitalization. Right? This is a buzzword that everyone uses, but there are some very specific initiatives that have been announced that maybe did not capture public attention in ways that I think you guys should be aware of, that will impact not just your lives in terms of individual Malaysians, but also in terms of the larger corporate landscape. And I just want to mention one here, something which I think Farhan may be familiar with, which is the National Digital ID project. It's been in discussions for a long time already. Different people have attempted it. The latest iteration, which I'm a little bit more optimistic about, is the expedited rollout of the National Digital ID under a recently established unit called GovTech Nucleus that sits in the Ministry of Finance. And they are modeled after a similar unit called GovTech Singapore. And for those of you who may be a little bit familiar with the Singapore ecosystem, they have something called SingPass, their national digital ID that taps onto hundreds, if not thousands, of government services as well as services from the private sector. So if that can be rolled out successfully in the near term, we're talking about between 6 months to a year, maybe on a pilot basis, a lot of you guys would be able to see how it impacts you. So, you know, from, let's say, an eKYC perspective, you'll be able to approve credit cards in 3 minutes rather than 3 weeks, because you'll be able to allow the National Digital ID ecosystem to allow financial institutions to access your records, but in a secure fashion. The third area that I'm pretty excited about is in the area of sustainability and ESG. So not just in Madani, but also the related documents that have been announced, which is the New Industrial Master Plan 2030, as well as the National Energy Transition Roadmap. Right, so, you know, and sustainability is now a buzzword. But I can tell you 5 years ago when I was at MITI, the kind of pressures, the kind of initiatives, the kind of government direction and also private sector support for many of the ESG initiatives was not as strong. We see it much clearly now. So for example, if you want to go and find financing for a coal-fired power plant in Malaysia, I think it will be very, very difficult. Yes. Yeah, and that's for good reasons, right? So I think, you know, in terms of the kind of jobs that you want to have and the kind of skills that you want to pick up, sustainability issues is something that you need to be aware of. You need to be aware of the kind of different certification ecosystem that's out there, and it's something that many more people are taking up as micro-credentials. You know, last time it was the CFA, now I think ESG is going to be much more important. And this is why I think, you know, it's important also to have those plans. I, you know, disagree a little bit with Yasu in the sense that those plans are important so that it can be a reference point to the civil servants to follow, and also for the private sector to see how they can align with the government and also perhaps even invest more in areas of interest to the country's economy, and not just to Malaysia, but also to the region. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Ong. I guess what you said is the two key items, right? Digitalization is the way we got to move forward with it, and sustainability is where we want to be in the future. And with that, I'm going to ask Farhan, you've got experience in digitalization and carry out a lot of your own entrepreneur projects overseas and everything. How do you see this challenge? Because you're with PayNet now to take up this challenge under Project Madani.
Yeah, good morning, everyone, and thank you for the kind acknowledgement. I think I think what you two said so elegantly, I won't repeat because I won't say it as nicely. So thank you for sharing those great sentiments and the optimism that should happen here. You see, many of you are here because you were born here. I came to Malaysia because I wanted to come to Malaysia last year. Because I, as an outsider who's lived in the US most of my life, I only see opportunity in Malaysia. I see tremendous opportunity in Malaysia. Like Dr. Ami, you mentioned, we have all the raw ingredients. I think there's a F1 race car parked in the garage. We just need to become better drivers of the F1 race car, and we can win this race and go very, very fast. Who's going to drive this car? Not us. We are the X generation. It's everybody on that side of the stage. You get to drive that car, right? And that's kind of what I see here. Now, PayNet, many of you may not know what PayNet is. PayNet runs a lot of the products that we use every day, whether it's Do It Now, My Debit, FPX, JohnPay, Maps ATM. Basically, in total, PayNet transaction volume that we process is 3.1 times the national GDP. So we process as much value of payments that's 3 times as big as the GDP of the country. So PayNet is in a very great position to influence the economic outcome for the country. And so we feel that as a great privilege and a massive responsibility. So maybe I talk about our values because that aligns with a lot of what Dr. Ami said as well. We only have 4 values. First one is aspiration. We must think 10 years out, 5 years out, and for the betterment of the nation in the future, not just in the near term. Second value is curiosity. That means we must always be learning new ways of doing things and being globally competitive. Third one is that, again, like you acknowledged, great change does not happen overnight, and great change is not easy. As a serial entrepreneur, there's a very good book that I read. It's called The Hard Thing About Hard Things, which basically says that doing big things is very, very, very hard. And you need perseverance and grit to get through them. And lastly, integrity, which is a key part of our journey. Because we have the responsibility of being in the center of things, we have to be very high integrity as an organization. So we operate with those 4 values as our driving force, and that matters. But across, when I look at the Madani framework, we literally follow that, right? There's raise the ceiling, raise the floor, right? Digitization. We're super excited about the digital ID, but we have a backup plan too. So we will get it one way or the other. Open data, open banking, we're going to try to bring that to the country. In the last 3 years, through some innovation and some effort, we have converted just our government agency payments from cash to digital from about mid-50s to about 82% in 3 years. We keep working on innovating and changing those things. Micro SMEs are the driving force of a country. And in Malaysia, we have the privilege, no matter what you might see in the news sometimes, we have the privilege of being one of the lowest cost payment providers in the world, and certainly the lowest cost provider in the region. We should be proud of that. Okay. Then I look at security. PayNet has a role to play in securing not just PayNet, but the entire country. So we worked very closely hand in hand with Bank Negara to build the National Scam Response Center, where 25% of the money that would have left the country or left the bank accounts by scammers, we are now able to identify and recover. Just in the last few months, we've done this. Infrastructure build and where we are. PayNet has now cross-border real-time payments with Singapore, Indonesia, Thailand, and China. With these 4 corridors of real-time payments, with 5 more coming next year, we already have more real-time payment corridors than any other country in the world. That's Malaysia at the #1 spot in the world, not just in the region. We should be proud of that. And finally, nothing that we can do goes without the ESG element in it, right? That's very, very critical. We have 2 landmark programs. One is called PayNet Akar, which is about educating the next generation to be able to handle this challenge that we're going to present to the world and the opportunity that we're going to present. It's about education. It's about building that part. And then we have PayNet Chamba, which is called Sprouting, which means how do we sustain prosperity through digital payments? You see, there's no point in just converting cash to digital payments. The value of digital payments is if we can utilize that to increase prosperity, to increase economic output for the underserved markets, and to increase the nation's GDP. So PayNet Chamba is an incredible initiative that is driving just those virtuous cycles of sustained prosperity. It's a really cool program where we invest in certain things, and then they start to grow by themselves. And over time, they snowball into much, much bigger commercial outcomes. So I think for us, all of this is part of the Madani framework, whether we do it by design exactly or it just coincides. But we are at a position and a nexus to help the country become better, to give you guys the best F1 race car. So that when you're ready to drive, you can outdrive anybody that you want to, as long as you want to. So please, want to.
So you hear it. We're a country with diverse difference in geographical, the ability to do things and everything. And I guess the changes are here, the catalysts are here. It's a question of, like Farhan said, let's embrace it. Let's take up the challenge and do it. I mean, like what you say, it's there. It's a matter of the young generation wants to embrace and take on the challenge. Well, let's go to my first question, Dr. Yasu. I think, your global views and perspective as to how we think the Madani economic narrative will be a game changer to the Malaysian economy overall. And maybe also from your perspective, have you seen it, similar principles that we want to carry out here in Malaysia, in other countries as well, which maybe as a recipe for success coming from Malaysia?
Okay, well, thank you very much. So, in fact, let me start by quickly responding to Kian Ming's point about plans and so on. In fact, when I worked in other countries, I often complained about a lack of clear strategy and document written down on paper. And that made it difficult for us and also the private sector, civil society, and so on to figure out exactly where the government was going. Because in its place, what you have is either verbal pronouncements by different ministers and president and so on, which are not always consistent with each other. And that consistency depended on how well the head of the state governed, the government, the cabinet and so on. And it varied, right? Or some old piece of legislation that was passed, in a different context, and then the bureaucrats were, enforcing it, and then that was the de facto policy. So I do grant that, there's value in these things. It's a balancing act, I think, because too many can also be confusing. But what I think is interesting in this particular moment, as I tried to explain, was that the Madani vision and the economy framework serves as an anchor for some of these plans. And I have had the privilege of being, a little bit involved in the NIMP process. And I think it is a very strong plan. And it has a lot of the elements of Madani already in place at a much more concrete level. So if the government can fully implement that or implement a good chunk of it, NIP, you will see a lot of progress, along the ways, for example, that Kian Ming talked about in terms of the higher paying jobs being created. It also has the vision of bringing industrial development to areas that have been kind of left behind, places outside of Selangor, Penang, and a little bit of Johor and so on. It's not the first time that I think the government talks about it. So, the proof of the pudding is in eating it. And, it's in the implementation. So the game will change not because you have a great vision that allows the alignment of policy directions, which is necessary, I think, but in the details of how you implement them. Now, before continuing on this implementation, one element that I think would be nice to have, and I think the components of the Madani vision will continue to emerge from the government, right? Is a clear articulation of the raising the floor vision. NIMP is a key component of the raising the ceiling element, right? And also, the fiscal responsibility that the Prime Minister talks about a lot, and the Fiscal Responsibility Act that creates parameter of responsible fiscal management. These are all in favor of, in support of the growth development agenda, raising the ceiling. Raising the floor, I think it's still work in progress, and I think we heard from Nurulizat, and there's discussions and work going on social protection. Clear articulation of this, I think, would help. I can come back to that if we're going to touch on the budget. Back to implementation. So one thing that I find in comparison to some of the experiences I've had in other countries that really glaringly missing in Malaysia is scrutiny of, public scrutiny, that is, of what the government has done with public funds in the past. So when the budget is presented, tabled to the parliament, usually in other places, there's an account of how much was spent, and then in a more advanced system, there's an account of what was achieved, with the budget of the previous year. That's kind of missing here, right? And then similarly, what's missing is a detailed program level evaluation. So we did a quick overview of some programs, and let's say, to both raise the ceiling and also the floor in the economic realm, it's very important that you find a way of strengthening SMEs. And one way to strengthen SMEs these days is to help them digitalize their operations. And there's lots of programs, actually. We counted a few years ago, 101 programs by about at least 35 government entities at both the federal and state level. 101 programs, right? And we, at least I'm not aware of any kind of a rigorous evaluation as to whether these programs achieve the objectives. In the realm of social assistance, much needed. There are 167 programs across 17 agencies, at least, give or take. Things may change, but usually government programs do not die, so it's unlikely that the number of the programs has reduced. Right? I don't know if anybody has full overview of exactly what is being delivered through this program. And so, there's work to be done there to make sure that implementation happens. And the only way that we know is looking at the implementation itself and evaluating the impact. And so I think that's a, key missing part to make sure that the Madani framework and the associated plans can actually change the game. The vision is clear, the aspirations are appropriate, targets are ambitious, but I thought also, appropriate in my view. But, unless you have the final piece, you may not know what happened, except at the global level. You may know that Malaysia has achieved, I think, the 7 targets in Madani, like, top 25 in corruption perception index, or one of the top 30 largest economies. You will know whether you got there or not, but you may not know why not.
Thank you, Dr. Yasu. Datuk Ami, if I may ask, today the perception of the widening of our income gap between the M40 and B40, can I get your views in terms of where you see women at the center of the transformation agenda? Will be also going to be important for us to be able to contribute to the economic growth as well, from that perspective?
Okay, so again, I have a slide. I have a slide for everything because, as World Bank has mentioned, it's all about executing. You cannot execute, and again, as you have mentioned, Yasusan, you cannot execute if you don't have data. And that's where Farhan has done a tremendous job, right? So if I could have my slide, whilst we wait for that slide, the one key thing that I really want to be able to say is that great stuff, the National ID project, what I would really like to introduce to everybody here, which I have also just recently been introduced to, is the concept of digital public infrastructure, right? So if we really want to talk about inequality, right, in your gender equality indices or status and rankings, etc., digital public infrastructure, I'm assuming that's what is covered under the National ID project, right? Partly, right, where it's designed for security, privacy, and diversity, right? Because in this world today, 750 million women are considered unbanked. 250 million women are considered underbanked. That's 1 billion people out of the current global population of 7.5 billion. I could stand corrected on that number. But imagine the economic potential that we will unleash, right? Because 1 billion women having adequate, appropriate, resilient, robust access to financial services opens them up to then having access to products, 3 key products: credit, insurance, and pensions. The world will change, right? So before we talk about, the one word that I am not comfortable with is the word equality, especially when we talk about, and you put them together with equality of opportunities. I just don't see it existing, right? We are very structurally so far away from it. So my focus, and June will know because we are all part of the discourse on the 30% club, our focus is the E in DEI. Yes, we focus on diversity, we focus on inclusion as the end outcome, but the focal point of investment has to be in the E, it's equity. So I know my husband, as I was trying to share with him my thoughts, he said, pause, just ask the people in the room first, whether they understand equity. So could I just have a show of hands? How many people actually feel comfortable that they actually are familiar and understand equity? I'm just kind of curious. Okay, cool. So let me actually be of service this morning. Okay, this is the visualization, and this visualization is thanks to the UN actually. Every day, all of us have the need to get from point A to point B. So imagine that in journeying from point A to point B, you are everybody. It doesn't matter that you are like me, vertically challenged. I refuse to call myself short. I'm only vertically challenged. Then there are people like Kian Ming, who are perhaps, of certain genetic disposition, who happen to be, not vertically challenged. Then imagine people of different shapes and sizes, right? People who, like us, have 2 legs. There are people with 1 leg, right? There are people with no legs. If you give all of us the same standard 2-wheeler, how many percent of people do you think will get from point A to point B? I think that would be a fairly low number. But if we were to actually design it for outcomes and actually give, right, a vehicle or mode of transportation that actually is appropriate for the needs of vertically challenged, not vertically challenged, right? Legs, no legs, it will be a completely different outcome. If we were to give 2-wheeler standard bikes, but sized to fit, different outcome. If we were to give 3-wheeler solutions to people who have perhaps, different types of challenges, and if you give a tandem to people who can't actually ride bikes, it will be a totally different outcome. So that's my point, right? It's about equity. So when you want to talk about gender equality, income equality gaps, I want to share with you this particular slide. Because as I've mentioned, I've been on this crusade, right, for the last couple of months to really bring the really important discussions to the table. And what is I found really astounding is this, that for universities in Malaysia, right? No, back to the previous slide, right? Okay. For STEM students in Malaysian universities, look at that tremendous data point. Females are 53%, right, of students who enter STEM compared to men who are now only 47%. STEM graduates entering the workforce, women are 52% and male are 48%. But what I didn't include in that data slide, because I really wanted to tell you personally, is that we enter, more women, we enter the workforce, more women, but guess what? When we come to senior management, C-suites and boardrooms, it thins out to global average of 25 to 35%. What happened? Women fell off the cliff. So what happened? So what we need to focus on is not the why it happened. That's really the train's left there. What we need to focus on is how did it happen, right? Because if we can answer how it happened, why is it that women are not in the critical positions and seats of decision making, of influencing, particularly in domains where women need to be there, since they know how women consumers and collaborators need, right, to be able to be effective. You need the women in the decision making seats and roles, right? Simple as that. But above all, if you put women, right, in those seats, what is the outcome for Malaysia to achieve Malaysia Madani, right, with the 7 goals? You will unleash 36% additional GDP, which is equivalent to $200 billion, right? And that is if Malaysian women's participation in the labor force were equal to men. I only quote whether or not the facts are right, computed accurately, is besides the point. The point is the unleashing of the economic potential. If women, as Madani, as one of the Madani 7 goals actually states, which is to increase women's economic participation to 60%. That is what we are going to get.
Thank you, Dr. Ami. What I learned from this is it's not going to be one size fits all. Everyone in this room's got to be able to be creative and to be able to challenge yourself for the future again. Dr. Ong, I'm going to ask you a very sensitive question here. You've seen the budget, and Dr. Yasu wants us to touch on the budget, where we've seen several tax reforms coming in, expansion of the service tax. You heard about capital gains tax, you heard about now luxury tax and everything. Is that going to bring us forward in Malaysian Madani? Or should we revert back to the old GST VAT style? That's the controversial question I have for you.
Actually, to me, not that controversial. I've answered this in public and in private before. But just a couple of responses to what Yasu as well as Amy has said. On the NIMP, both of us were on the task force to relook at it and to give it a new flavor. Just want to shout out to EY. EY was actually the consultants that put the package together, so give them a round of applause for the good work they did. And exactly, implementation is key. That's why the task force meetings in terms of following on the NIMP will start next week. And I also want to echo exactly what Yasu said just now, the importance of being able to measure the effectiveness of different government policies. And to tie it back into what Amy said just now, I think, I suspect there's also, there would also be a very interesting gender dimension to the measurement of the outcomes and the effects. Because my suspicion is that many of the government policies in terms of assistance and in terms of grants would probably tend to overrepresent males or male businesses. I'm not sure whether that jives with what you've seen in other places. So, that's one of the reasons why these things need to be brought up. And then on the counterpoint, it will be also very interesting, to see from the perspective of digitalization, the kind of measurement effects that we could, and innovative products can be rolled out that could have, more positive effect on women, including women entrepreneurs. So one example would be, if let's say you were able to access the transactions through Do It Now and through different e-wallets, I suspect that you would be able to find that there would be a lot of women entrepreneurs who would be able to access credit lines just based on their cash flow that they would not have been able to access if, let's say, you're just going to use your collateral in terms of your fixed assets and other available assets, which are, again, usually more, tend to be greater preponderance to the males in the family. Right, so that's another way in which, when you think about the digitalization process, there are gender elements. There are areas where I think, even from an ethnic dimension, you will be able to unleash some of the potential that Datuk Amy talked about. So going back to the questions of tax, I think one needs to look at it from a more comprehensive angle. And at the same time, later on, go down into the details. I think the way I see the Madani budget for this round being structured, it is part and parcel of a journey. And that journey includes tax as well as subsidy reform. So the journey may not be as fast as what some people would like, including perhaps even Nurul Izzah, in terms of reducing subsidies on the fuel part, which I think may come sooner rather than later. But at the same time, it may not be as fast in terms of, let's say, some people wanting to bring back the GST. But I think there are some things that have been introduced that can lead us towards that possible goal, maybe later on in the future. So one area would be e-invoicing. I think as a tax consultant and expert, you would know this. That is part and parcel of getting more companies on board in terms of the digitalization process. And once there's better e-invoicing structures and also implementation, the implementation of GST will become easier. And not only that, your tax GST refunds also would become easier, because the verification of the e-invoicing would be more accurate. And then when you talk about rolling back subsidies, you can see diesel subsidies is going to be rolled back, and it's an important precursor towards the rolling back of the petrol subsidies, because there's got to be certain mechanisms that need to be put in place. Whether you want to give a fleet card to certain commercial operators so that you can give them a quota and limit the inflationary effects. And if you want to introduce something like that, you need to be able to plug whatever leakages that may result. People register 100 vehicles, they use 80, the rest they take and sell and do other things with it. Again, technology plays a role, in terms of being able to track the sort of like journey and the mileage taken by all these vehicles. And in that process of enhancing different tax regimes, including, for example, the global minimum tax, something that is going to be implemented in 2025, and also the capital gains tax, where the details will only be known when the finance bill is tabled, and I think that's going to be likely to be tabled on the 1st of November. So that's where all the tax consultants will have their work cut out for them. And I think the trajectory is one that's right. If, let's say, all these things are in place, I think the conditions for the implementation of a GST would be much better. Maybe not under this particular 4-year time frame, maybe in the second Madani government, the second term of the Madani government.
Thank you, Dr. Ong. I mean, you mentioned this with digitalization and the fuel subsidy. I recall almost 10 years ago, Tan Sri Wahid, who was CEO of Maybank, went to join the government, and he wanted to do this, reformat the whole subsidy, and he was planning to use only our IC. But today, with the data and the technology and everything, I think it's a better way to move forward with it. Actually, I've got a few more questions for the panelists, but I've just been informed we're going to be almost to the end. They asked me to spare the questions to you, but you get more grilling questions from the young generation out there. So I'm going to open up to Q&A to everyone in this room. Who's going to be the bold one to take the first question or to provide the first question? In EY, we have this view: the better the question, the better the answer is going to be, and the better the world will be for all of us. So challenge you guys. And ladies, please come forward with the first question for our esteemed panelists.
Hi. Can I get a question, please? It's on your left side. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for all the insightful sharing. So this is Zillian from Kananga. I got a question dedicated to Farhan about the national ID, where, I mean, a lot of concern about the personal data for us, the rakyat. So I'm just wondering whether all our data will be protected by PayNet or it will be open to third party via an open tender. And also, what measure will PayNet do in protecting our data, and what is the expected increment of our GDP and tax collection by percentage from this initiative? And also, I would like to ask Dr. Ami as well, or maybe other panelists, how do you see the fractional shares initiative mentioned by Dr. Sri Anwar recently, especially when the fees, if you actually buy only one share, that you can actually give up about 14% of the gain of buying only one fractional shares. Thank you.
Okay, I'll take the first one. Thank you for the question. I think national digital ID has been a notion that's been around for about 5-6 years and hasn't had progress. I think now there's a new renewed interest in the last budget, a new organization to fast track it and build it. I think PayNet is trying to consider in the middle, how do we help bridge the gap really from financial services perspective only, not from the broader national agenda of one digital ID for every purpose. So our goal is to make finance easier for people. The notion behind open digital ID and open data is really, it's a very simple notion. The notion is to shift the ownership of your data and your credential from a bank to you. That's kind of what it means, right? Today, companies that you provide information to, they monetize your data, they monetize your information, they utilize it, protect it to keep you in a closed environment, an open environment. Our journey and the purpose for doing this is not for any commercial purpose. We're a development organization. Our purpose is to unlock the value back to the end user, the rakyat, and say, this is your data. Now you tell me, who do you want to share it with? I don't want to decide where it goes and how it goes. But if you want to open a new investment account, a new insurance packet, you have to do something for healthcare, or anytime you want to do something, our goal is to make it easier. Now, of course, there's some element of data storage. And that is a very tricky one from a security perspective. But we are investing significantly into cybersecurity, data protection. And the simple thing is, the answer really is, at some point, right, no matter how strong a container we can build around data, every container is breakable because there's somebody on the other side trying equally hard to break it. So our module really is how do we distribute data in multiple nodes, and we bring it together in real time as an algorithm, identify you, and then make the data disappear again, because we don't really want to be holding on to a lot of sensitive data ourselves either. So from our perspective, we are complementing the national initiatives around that digital ID, not replacing it. We are complementing it for our industry, trying to give ownership back to the user in a safe way. And that's kind of how our perception of open data, open banking, and digital ID is. I hope that helps you answer.
Can I just comment on the sort of tax and related matters? Yeah. So, you know, there's been a lot of debate about tax, but a lot focused on the instrument, right? Whether it should be SST or GST on the premise, which almost everybody seems to agree, that Malaysia needs to collect more and broaden the base. But the question that I think you may want to be thinking about is, why do you want more tax? If you do, right? What do you do it with? I think Nurliza kind of hinted at some of these things, and it was really good, nice to hear it. You know, she talked about better healthcare and things like that, right? So, you know, because what you want to do on the spending side drives how much more revenue you need. So I think that's the conversation that needs to be happening a little bit more. And from an international perspective, we actually did a little marketing. Yeah, we published the Malaysia Economic Monitor this month, and it's about the effectiveness of fiscal policy tools in reducing poverty and inequality in Malaysia. And so we looked at this, you know, looking at how much, you know, people pay tax, how much cash transfers they receive and subsidy they receive, and what does it do to people's income. and inequality. And it reduces poverty altogether, but not very much. About 1 percentage point of the poverty level, and about 6.5 percentage point of Gini inequality index, which is the measure of income inequality. How does it compare to other countries? Especially the inequality reduction is well below the average of upper middle income countries. So Malaysia could be doing better or more. What's the difference? Malaysia does not spend enough in social expenditures like health as compared to other countries. That's where the difference is. So the debate is, oh, GST is regressive. Yes, it tends to be, but so is SST, right? But as long as you collect enough and then spend effectively, you can more than mitigate the regressive effect of the tax instrument. So that's one point I thought it would be useful. But also on the cash transfer and subsidy and so on, and there's a lot of discussion about who gets what. Oh, there's leakage, That's an important discussion, but what I find missing is the clearer articulation of what you want to do with cash transfer. Why do you want to give cash to people? And what difference do you want it to make? We have run a survey during COVID and then found that almost 80% of the households, people received some form of cash assistance during that time. More than half of the households earning 4,000 ringgit or below said that they could not meet the basic needs, despite receiving cash assistance. But a lot of it was going to people who didn't need it, right? So is it a question of leakage? Yes, it is, but also it's a concept we call adequacy. You want to make sure that, the people who need the help get enough. And right now, Malaysia receiving, the poorest households were receiving the equivalent of 10% of their income in cash assistance from government. How does it compare to other countries? Upper middle income country average 20 to 25%. You don't want to give too much, obviously, but you want to give these people enough so that it can really be meaningful. Once you do that, you fix that amount, and you know how much budget you have, then you can naturally calculate, okay, how much the coverage can be. If that's not enough, then you have to find a way of raising more revenue or reallocating from other sources like subsidy. But the starting point is not, how many people are getting it. The starting point, I think, is it making a difference? What difference do you want it to make? So, those are 2 points about tax and cash transfer that I wanted to share.
Okay. I've got the project directors there standing already on the booth. I think I can only afford one more last question. One last one.
Hello. I'm Alex from London College of Clinical Hypnosis on your left. And I would like to ask for...
Sorry, London College of what? I heard hypnosis.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Dr. Ong, I'm on your left. Okay. I'm a therapist, and I would like to ask about inclusivity and disability. Okay, what are the industry doing to enable people with disability to get employment? What are because according to Disability there are 453,238 of them in Malaysia. And according to the law, corporate are required to have 1% of quota for them. But to be honest, I haven't seen any promotion on this to encourage them to come up and work in the workforce. So what the industry can do about it? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank
Good
you
question.
very much for that question. I hope it hasn't put me into a hypnotic state. Okay. I am going to be very candid. I don't know the answer. Thank you for sharing that, you're supposed to actually invest 1%, right, of your revenue, corporate revenue. I will put my hand to heart. I don't see that. It is definitely not something as yet that we track. But my contribution to the discourse is that for me, it's not disability. To me, it's just differently abled, right? So hence, yes, investments are required. But maybe my parting shot would be just to share, because recently a woman by the name of Claudia Godin won the Nobel Prize for economics. And she won the prize for some of the, what she basically did. Look, all I did was just unearth the mountains of data to come up with some key themes, right? So when she said that, and this is really, to really answer also in a roundabout way your question. She said that more men than women express interest in economics when starting college, adding that people often have the misconception that the field of economics is solely about finance. And I think Yasuda-san that was what he was trying to say. We say, meaning, she says, you know what? Economics is about people. It's about inequality. It's about the female labor force and those who are differently abled. It's about health. It's about economic development. It's about well-being. And the men in the economics field, they say, really? I didn't know that. So between you and me, we must make sure that they know that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I know I'm right to the end now. We're still going to be around. If you feel like asking us questions, please do so. On behalf of my panel, we'd like to thank everybody for your active participation, and we wish you a great learning day ahead. Thank you very much. Back to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for such an interesting discussion. Now we would like to invite the Director of Youth Economic Forum, Ms. Aoni, to present a token of appreciation to our speakers. So, speakers, you may remain on stage.
As well as to our moderator. First and foremost, we would like to thank Mr. Farhan Ahmad.
And thank you so much to Mr. Yasuhiko Matsuda. Round of applause, please.
Datuk Ami Moris.
And thank you to Dr. Ong Kian Ming.
And finally, our moderator, Mr. Bernard Yap. I would like to invite all on stage to kindly come to the front for a quick group photo session.
Once again, let's give a round of applause to our speakers and moderator for the economic agenda.
And as they make their way back to their seats, thank you very much for your contributions. And now, that wraps up our first agenda for the day.